Yay Networks.
Hey, wild ones. Welcome back to our conversation with Jeanette Collins. Enjoy.
It's interesting because when I first went to you, that was the beginning of my journey, of my spiritual journey. I didn't know it was at the time. But when I look back at how far I've come in the last 10 years and all the experiences that have happened and how I've shifted and how I've changed and how I've evolved, it all started. I mean, it started when I was born, but it really started. It really started. I started doing the heavy lifting at 10 years ago when I walked in your door. I didn't know it then, though.
I think that's so beautiful. And I feel so honored to actually be a part of people's journeys. It feels like, I just feel so blessed. Like, how did I get to be in this position? And I don't see it as anything other than actually a blessing. I mean, it's such a privilege for people to let me into that private space of theirs.
Yeah. And
I hold it dear. It's not something I take lightly. It's really valuable to me, All my kids know how to meditate. I've taught every single one of them. And at first I was the weird mom. Because everything they'd come to me, I'd say, well, why would you keep creating that for yourself? I'm not, Mom. Why quit saying this weird stuff? But now they're all on board. And the thing is, they didn't get on board because I talked long enough about it. They got on board because they watched my life change. They watched me doing it, even behind their little voices of going, oh, that's dumb. That's okay. I taught them to think it would be dumb, when I didn't know. So when I made the shift, of course they're going to think what I'm doing is weird. And so did a lot of my friends. And I gained some and I lost some. And it was okay. Some needed to go do their own journey. And I wasn't supposed to stay stuck to them. There was a whole another world out there of beings that I would be able to connect with and work with. And I don't know how to say it any better than I absolutely am so passionate about this. And one of my best passions is I love, love, love the youth. I think they're so misunderstood. And I think they're being boxed up and labeled in ways that is really causing them to even second guess who they think they are. Because people aren't seeing them for who they are. And they're coming here, but they're not getting much guidance. And I'm not accusing people out there. I'm just saying as a general. And I get a lot of the youth coming to me and sitting with me. And we'll have some really good conversations. And then I'll check in with them. 15 and 16, sometimes starting at 12. And they'll be coming. And now they're mothers of their own children. And their spouses are coming saying, can you help me? Because I don't know how to connect with her. Because she keeps saying, well, this is my issue. And I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, let's talk. Because she won't blame him for all her stuff anymore. Because she's learned to take accountability and responsibility of her own life and say, oh, this is my issue. I just need to go work on this. I'll be back in a bed. Well, he felt like she was ignoring him.
That's the ripple effect.
Right.
Because now he's being forced to grow
and now
and
he wants to know, how do I love her? How do I talk to her? And how can I be a better father? Because he's like, I go to bed and I feel sad at how I've treated my children. And I said, when you learn to love you and treat you with loving respect, and you practice these tools inside of you, you don't have to try to figure out how to be a good parent. You will automatically offer that to your kids. I started talking to my kids in the same way I talk to me. So if you're talking to your kids and you're just like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, recognize that's how you talk to you. You're just becoming more conscious of it. Because you now regret it when you say it to your kids, but you might not be regretting it yet when you say it to you.
Yeah.
And I watched those changes in me happen, and I was so proud of myself. Because I'd be like, yes, I'd go to bed and go, I was a good mom today.
Yeah, and you broke generational trauma.
Yeah, and I believe that was part of the reason I came here.
For sure.
Was to do it, because my mother said, it still tells me to this day, why do you have to be so different? And I said, well, because I didn't come here to walk tiptoe on the earth. I came to make a noise. I came to make a noise while I'm here. I want to make some clatter. Yeah. I would go lay on my kids' bed at the end of the day, because my ex-husband at the time, he would travel a lot. He was out of town a lot, so it was just me and the kids a lot of the time. And at the end of the day, I'd go lay on the end of their bed, and because I had all the little beds stuck together. I've got five little ones. And I'd lay on their bed and I'd say, I have a question for you guys. It's going to be interesting. And they're like, what? And I said, how do you think I did as a mom today? And they were brutally honest. When you were fixing dinner and you got mad at me because I was like, yeah, thank you for telling me about that, because that's something I want to watch that I don't do anymore. I really want to be more thoughtful about what you're doing. And I actually had stopped being conscious. And I went back into my program and I started just barking at you. And they would tell me what I showed up. And then I'd say, how do you guys think you did as kids?
Oh, I'm
Well,
going to implement this.
they were like, we were really good today. And all we did is, I'm like, good. What do you want to do different tomorrow? And I just started asking them that. When they were, my oldest, I think she was like 8 or 9. And that's when I started to ask that question to myself. And I didn't learn all this out of the blue, like some clear blue sky. I read books after books after books, and I studied, and I had physical personal teachers that actually talked with me and worked with me here and would say, ask me very poignant questions that took me home, and I'd have to sit in my own stuff for weeks and weeks and go, I don't like talking to that person. They just made me look at myself, and sometimes it's not a pretty picture. But I didn't want to be given that picture to the world. I came to do something, and I don't want to die, like Wayne Dyer says, with my music still in me. That song gets to be sung. And it gets to be sung loud and off key, if that's the way I sing it. But it gets to be sung. And my thing is how can I love? When I was a little girl, I still remember my chin would barely sit on the windowsill in the living room. And I'd watch all the kids come home from school. There was a big high school down the street. I was probably 2 or 3. And I would tell my mom, when I grow up, I'm going to love the world. And she'd say, well, that's a good idea, but because of religion, we love the people that believe like us. And I remember distinctly looking at her and going, she's too young to know what I mean. I was 2 or 3. And I remember thinking my mother was too young to understand.
You can remember that.
Yeah.
I remember clear back when I was 18 months old.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
I've heard that your first memories are typically around, 5 years old for most people.
I don't know why I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember everything,
Interesting.
obviously, but I have some pretty poignant memories where I remember specific things at certain ages.
Wow.
And 18 months was one that I remembered something important. And then at 2.5 to 3, and I only knew I was that age because my mother told me, you know how old you were? And then me and her having an argument at 4. Well, she called it an argument. I just thought it was a knowing. And at 4 years of age, she was ironing one of my sister's shirts. And I was leaning on the ironing board, discussing with her how I would never, ever live polygamy, that was not my job. And she's like, and so she's trying to convince this 4-year-old who's going wayward at 4 already, that it's time for you you got to understand the beliefs. And she's like, if you don't live it, you can't go to the celestial kingdom. And I'm like, okay, what other kingdom? She's like, well, you can go to the terrestrial and Jesus will come visit you, but you can't live there. And I was like, oh. But eventually, if he teaches you, you learn, then you'll move up to the celestial kingdom. So I'm like, oh, so I still have to live polygamy. What other kingdom? She's like, well, there's the telestial, but Jesus and nobody comes there and you never live polygamy. And I'm like, I'll take it.
That's the one I want.
But it wasn't because I just didn't want polygamy.
4.
Yeah.
Wow.
Deep inside, we come and we know what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And at 4, I just like, this isn't my path, but it's okay that I'm born in this. What a great environment. I mean, I didn't just get stimulation of 2 siblings. Had a host of siblings, a host of parents, a host of abusive experiences that I could learn to see beyond the abuse and see what was really going on. One of my dad's wives, who was the biggest contributor to abuse, and her story, if you followed her whole life, you could see where it came from. But as a kid, you don't know that. She came when I was 5. And my first experience was her breaking every bone in my hand with the back end of a knife for not asking for something. So she broke all the bones in my hand.
My gosh.
So that was my first experience. So she was kind of a scary person.
Kind of.
And when I
Very
was
scary
11, she'd given birth to one of my siblings. And she was at home and she had hemorrhaged really bad. So my mother said, you're in charge of sitting with her and taking care of her, give her tea and stuff like that until the doctor comes and checks on her again. And you take care of the baby, who's a day old now. And I'm like, 11. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
But I've been doing that for a lot of years already.
I bet.
So I'm in there knowing what I'm holding this little baby and feeding him bottles. And I sit up on the bed and I'm just putting tea on her lips, to get her lips wet. And she was in and out of it. And I picked up her hands and her hands were dry. So I took some lotion. I was rubbing lotion on her hands. And I was thinking, when she gets better, these hands are going to slap the crap out of me. She's going to pull my hair. She's going to do... These are the hands that have been abusing me. And she opened her eyes just as I was having that thought. She looked at me and she said, why are you being nice to me? And I sat there and I was like, That's a very good question. And then it just was like a no-brainer. And I said, because that's who I am. And she closed her eyes. And I remember sitting there going, because I had siblings going by, you could put like stuff in her tea and she could die and then we'd be done with this.
Yeah, you were in control of her fate for a minute.
But I remember that stuck out to me. That stuck out to me in my life. It was a big, important moment, because where did that come from that said, this is who I am?
The knowing inside of you.
That I didn't want to hurt her.
Yeah.
Even though I knew when she got better, the abuse would start back. And I wasn't there to manipulate her to change. Just this inner, that's who I am. And she just looked at me and closed her eyes.
What, I mean, because it comes easier. I feel like some people just come here knowing, like yourself.
Yeah.
How do you teach people to find what their purpose is? Like, how do you teach, coach people to find their life purpose?
By teaching them
to it.
Basically the tools of transformation, because as you become aware of what you're thinking and feeling, and you can start to trust your own self, your own inner heart will guide you. And it'll come out and it'll pull things up. You may think you're going on this path, and it'll bump you clear over here and say, no, this is actually where you want. And it brings more joy to you than this one, you know? But it's all, I think, comes from you learning who you are as a being, and forgiving and understanding the past that you've had, so that the past doesn't own you anymore. That's the point. I mean, I told my kids the other day, I don't even have a past. I know that sounds strange. I look back at it and I remember the stories, but it's like a book you read one day and you put back on the shelf. There's literally nothing to it except for the gems I got. I can look at it and go, oh my gosh, that experience brought me so to here. But it's not like, oh, don't talk about that. That's so awful. I can never get past it. I was there once. But once that became healed in me and I could forgive and love me through the experience and realize it was my experience and drop the stories, it became a book of wisdom that literally sits there. Like, I don't have anger at my ex-husband. I don't have any hatred at him. I wish him the best and hope everything works out wonderful for him. And I'm ready to just move and do what I need to do, you know, and move forward. The same with childhood. I wouldn't change my life. Not one tiny, tiny piece of what happened. I would still walk in and accept the whole thing again. Say, bring it on. Let's see what I can learn. And let's do this again. You know, because the value of who you end up at the end, if you've done that work with yourself, is irreplaceable.
And it took every single step, the highs, the lows, everything in between to become who you are.
Yeah. And I think I wouldn't be able to contribute like I want to if I hadn't have been given the experience of like, you know, let's get you in a place where there's going to be a lot of abuse and a lot of reasons for you to hate and want to be different. Can you transcend that in the environment that says you can't? And a religious one, that's heavy enough as already, that there's all those beliefs that are being passed from your parents to you about who God is and what he thinks about you, and, you know, all those things. And to be able to move beyond those things and risk people not liking you and risk losing family and risk losing the connection. You really don't. You're just risking the belief and the program and the pattern to find something greater.
And you just keep reminding me of the quote. I mean, it's part of Prism's mission is when you heal yourself, you heal the world. Oh, yeah. And you definitely came here as a leader and a healer, like a leading healer. I know you don't like labels, so I'm trying not to label you.
No, but you definitely still have to use words, right?
Right. Yeah, but I do. You know, I've met a lot of beautiful people like yourself who just really are on the next level of transformation, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And I do believe that we're all here at the same time for a reason. Yeah. Like we're all connecting and coming into each other's lives because we're on a similar journey to heal. Yeah. And it's kind of cool when you look at that web of, you know, because there's a lot of dark and a lot of bad out there. And having a 13-year-old daughter, I see the dark and I'm very aware of all of it. But it's just I'm so grateful to be attracting people like you, like Connie, like into my life that helps support me raising my teenage daughter in this world. Yeah. You know? Oh, I 100% agree. And that's one of the reasons the youth I'm so drawn to them. And likewise, they're drawn to me. And I mean that in a very healthy, loving way. It's wonderful. I would love for you to meet Bobby. Yes. Yeah. She's a really special kid. Because I feel like that there's
the more they can understand that they actually can trust themselves inside, and that they're evolving. They're 13. It's like I tell my daughter who's 25, why is this happening? I said, darling, you're still evolving in your own humanity. You're reaching that point of what do I want as an adult? You didn't stop when you got out of high school. And a lot of them think they hit 18, that's like, now I'm an adult. There's still an evolution going on inside of them.
Their brain is still developing.
Exactly. And they're developing into beings, but it's like, what are they going to become if they don't know what to look for?
And that's the thing that is so hard to explain to a child, a teenager, 13-year-old, who doesn't know. I watch all these kids. They don't know how to put themselves out there. They don't know how to present themselves to the world. And no one's teaching them how. No one's giving them skills to trust themselves, to find out what makes you Bobby.
They're putting the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are having the cart put before the horse.
And the damn cell phones make it even worse.
Well, they don't know how. They're being told, go put yourself out there, but they don't know who the self is.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they're running out there and trying to live up to these things, and it's collapsing and failing. That's good to draw them back to say this. But if we can catch them before and say, can I help you rediscover you? And a lot of kids, I get calls all the time from these beautiful kids, and I love it. Do you have 5 minutes for me, Jeanette? I got an hour. What do you need? And they'll just sit and talk. Well, so-and-so said this about me. And I'm like, why? Okay, we're not going to talk drama. Why do you care? And why are you getting involved? That's your question of the month. You go sit with that and figure out, why do you care what your peers at school are saying about you? And I'm not saying that you should never have an emotion about it.
Yeah.
But I want you to go discover why you care. And then I want you to call me when you know what that is. So they'll call me back. I got it. I think I got it. And we'll hash about that for a few minutes. Okay, go try this. Go try this. And because I want them to find out that leaning is not necessary on anybody or anything. Mm-hmm. They got to lean here. And if they lean here, all their answers are here. All their guidance is here. They will not be led astray. They might fall, like everybody does, bump down and go, gosh, that was a bad decision. Mm-hmm. Good for you. Jump up and try a different one. But if you can't trust you, you'll run to everybody else and you'll live by everybody else's consequences.
I literally had this conversation with my husband last night. He's almost 50 years old, and he leans on me, it's great. I'm his wife. I lean on me all that you can and want to. But if he can't learn to lean on himself and trust himself fully, I'm like, I can only do so much.
Well, then you'll be held accountable for his failures as well.
Right.
Not meaning to, but it just by default. It's like, if you're bringing me my answers, then you're also going to bring me my pain.
Right. Well, and it's physically, metaphysically, emotionally, spiritually impossible for you to do that for him. He has to do it himself.
Right.
Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
I say this to Bobby.
I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And he's 49.
Well, but that's awesome. You are doing it because you're demonstrating it.
Yeah.
And he's aware.
That's all that matters. Well, that's one of the reasons, like I was telling Whitney earlier, that's why I started my podcast. Mm-hmm. Because I can't reach everybody out there, nor does everybody maybe want to find me. But if I can give a podcast that just gives tools, they're free. Mm-hmm. They don't have to, because I don't mind making money and doing things and earning money off of what I do. I think it's awesome. But I also want to offer things out because if I can help for nothing, goodness. I met a guy, he's 87 years old, came from Poland. His wife died. He doesn't even leave his house because he doesn't know how to associate around here, but he wants to change. So his friend gave him my podcast, and he's like, I sit with her in my living room, and I listen to these little 15-minute things, and then I practice them all day. And then when I go to the store, I practice at the store. And now I can do things I couldn't do before because I keep practicing, and I didn't have to go find a therapist and be scared.
That's
and I was
amazing.
like, that's why I put him there. So somebody could find it and say, I could do those things. They're easy. I've got journaling in there as one of them. And one of the things, write down what you don't want to be anymore. And then write down on the other side who you want to be. So you can see it in bold print. Oh, wow, I am selfish as crap. I think only of myself. What I want to do is think about others. So what do I need to do to shift from here to here? If you're in your head doing it, it'll disappear. Mm-hmm. But if you put it down on paper, you remember a little more because you're activating more neurons by doing that to say, I don't really want to do that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then when you go to do it, your soul's like, you're doing it. You're like, and you see the flash of the paper. You're doing it. Mm-hmm. You're messing up again. You're doing that behavior you promised you wouldn't do. And it's harder to shut him down when you've made a promise to yourself not to.
Yeah.
And you've written it down and said, these are my goals. You can do it. It's possible. But it's just harder.
Yeah.
You know? And that's, I don't know, the whole thing's passionate. We could go for hours and hours
we
and hours.
could.
Yeah, I know.
We
But I
could.
don't want to do hours and hours because people don't want to listen to hours and hours.
Right.
Well, I think that starting everything you've shared here today is beautiful and it's going to help so many people. But one more time, because we should wrap up. We've taken a lot of your time. This will probably be
We could sit here all day and
probably
keep
2
going.
episodes at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you like so much for coming and sharing your insights, and share with us one more time where people can follow you, because I do personally get asked, Connie gets asked, we get asked a lot, like where to start. And it sounds like your podcast is
The
like,
podcast is
that's
where
where I'm going to start recommending
Yeah.
a place to start.
Yeah, the podcast, you can find it on YouTube. Again, it's the Janetic code, Janetic code. So the Janetic code, or just type in my name, Jeanette Collins, and it'll pull it up. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on Audacity, it's on like 9 different places. I don't know all the names of them because I didn't memorize them. And then you can also, if people want to like find me to work with me, you can go to my website, which is Jeanette-Collins.com.
Okay.
And I've got a web page up there. People can go there. I do have an Instagram page, but I'm not very Instagram savvy. So people following, you haven't put nothing new. I'm like, I don't really know how. So I don't do a lot of new things that way on Instagram. I am on Instagram. I have a page up there and it has my Spotify link on it. So people can go to Spotify and find the podcast if they want off Instagram. I need to learn how to do a little bit more of that social thing. I just don't.
My
don't.
advice would be stay away.
I'm like, or get somebody else to run it for me.
Yeah, get someone else to run it for you. But your website, we'll link everything here. Your socialgram. We'll link your social media, your website, and YouTube.
Yeah, because if
in the
people
description.
send me an email or get on my website and then put things up there, I can go to the website and reach out to them through there. That way people can connect to me if they want to. All my work up to this point has been solely word of mouth. And I literally have clients all over the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been awesome. So sometimes I'm up at 2 a.m. on a phone call with somebody who's in another country who it's right before they go to work or right before they go to bed, and we can work together. And my ultimate goal is to be able to teach enough that people start to self-empower, and they don't need me. They're like, hey, I'm done. I'm like, woohoo. Good for you, because now you go out and you be a light somewhere and you teach the principles you've learned. It's not about people leaning on me. And I've had to learn that through this practice, because at first your ego's like, ooh, people need me, right? And your ego can get kind of big when people are like, we want to come to you. And it got to the point after doing it for so many years, I'm just like, I really want you to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. That brings me so much joy when I see these kids come and they're like, I'm living my life and I'm raising these little babies, and they're doing it with such love and accountability for their own actions and their own thoughts and emotions. And I'm just thrilled to death that they can be there and they can still keep growing, and that they don't need to come to me. I said, the goal is for you not to ever come back. That's the goal.
It's kind of, what is that? You teach a man to fish. What's that? If you give a man a fish, I don't know.
He'll eat once, but if you teach him
to
fish,
fish,
he'll eat for the rest of his life.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
so that he can learn. And that's my goal. I don't know hardly anything. I've had experiences, and my experiences are what I teach from. Is because experiences are the teacher, in my opinion. And not that I tell my story to people, because it's not really about that, just the experience. I know what it means and the journey it means, because I've done it, to constantly go and overcome an old pattern that you've done over and over and over. And I know what works and I know what doesn't. And telling the story doesn't work.
Yep.
It'll keep you stuck. Not telling the story, and that's hard, because people are like, but I feel so bad because. And you're like, drop the because and just go to the feeling, because you won't change anything in your life till you change. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing, that's why when you said earlier, and I thought this was so cute, to get up and just smile at yourself. The thing that was shifting you was that you were doing something outside of what you normally did. It wasn't the smiling at yourself or grin and bear it. look in the mirror, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was that you were taking yourself from laying in this environment that you was practiced and used to, and then getting up and trying to navigate in it, and having yourself do something different. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell clients all the time, you want to start making a change? Get up on the other side of the bed. Just something really silly like that. When you wake up, flip over and get off the other side of the bed. Brush your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed. And what it does is it causes you to think a little differently. And sometimes you're laughing and you're like, this is dumb. Why am I doing this? But you're not habitually going through your routine, blah, 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 and thinking and being the same way as you were yesterday. And it's just tiny little
tiny changes
that go, do something a little different, you know? Write something with your left hand if you're used to it this, and then laugh at how weird the writing looks, you know? A little note to your kid in their lunch and do it with your left hand. Sorry, Mommy's trying to do something different today. And they're like, I couldn't read it. It was German. And you're like, sorry. I wrote with my left hand, right? So just something tiny. And so I just tell them the best thing, if you're not willing to get up and meditate for a few minutes to start your day, or whatever it is, if that's not on your capacity to do, get out of bed on the other side.
I love that.
Yeah, ridiculous things too. I've told people, slide out onto the floor. I don't care. Be silly. Do something that's different. And
Just
tell
do
yourself.
something different.
Tell yourself, I need to do something different.
reprogramming.
And you'll start thinking a different thought because you started your day different. You started something in that wasn't just a pattern and a program for you.
Yeah, and it does. It changes your day. It
does.
works. It really does. Those
does.
little small behaviors.
The hardest part that people have in making the change is to not repeat the same pattern. That's the challenge people come up against. I did, is waking up and you're set. You're going to do it, and you keep doing it, and then you forget, and you wake up one morning and fall back into your old pattern. And that thing of change, and that's why I'm doing the cards, which we didn't talk about. I'm making a deck of cards that are almost done to go with the podcast. So when people are practicing podcast 1, awareness, or whatever it is, they've got a card right there. They put it on their dresser, put it on their fridge, and go, oh, that's what I'm practicing this week. I'm becoming aware. Flip it over. There's words on the back that will say, you know, this is what you're reminding of. You're learning to become aware of your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings. And there's little tips on the backs of all the cards. And then they can flip it back. They're not quite ready, but
you'll have to let us know when they're ready, because I'm
going to post it all up on Instagram.
Yeah, I'd love to sell them on my Prism website.
Yeah. As soon as they're ready, they're going to come up on.
If you're open to that, yeah.
Absolutely. Wherever they can get out, to me, is the best. I want people to have them because I know sometimes we need something just physical. Physical, tangible. You can just set out and go, that's what I'm working on. That's who I'm trying to become today. That's my goal for this week.
And again, it's those bite-sized, just one thing a day.
Yeah. And for people to celebrate when they do make a change, I don't care what it is. If you got up that morning and you weren't ornery, smile. You did something fantastic, bigger than what you know, because you're breaking a pattern, you know?
I love it.
Well,
Thanks, you guys.
Yes. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I know. Like I said, I mean, we could go on and on and on, but thank you for spending like a couple of hours with us.
Yeah. Time flies. Thank you to our listeners. We love you. Again, if you enjoy our podcast, if you enjoyed and learned something new today with Jeanette Collins, please share the podcast with your friends and family. You can also watch it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All of Jeanette's information will be linked in the bio, so you can find her website, her book, her podcast, and her cards that are coming soon that we're excited about. And don't forget,
be you, stay wild.
Yay Networks.